run up here and just quickly say hi and welcome everyone. We're going to do a little bit of a presentation about Pure as a certified service provider. That's the name. I always forget it. I have a small agenda here. We're going to do sort of an introduction to ORCID. What is ORCID? I have it here down here. What does it mean to be a certified service provider, and why did we decide on going in that direction? Well, why was this important for Pure? Then we're going to talk a little bit about inside Pure. How do you handle ORCID? What is the difference in Pure between having a public API connection or using the member API within Pure? And then just quickly talk about how do you authenticate your ORCID and why is that important? And if we have time for it, I'll just talk a little bit about what are our plans for further development inside Pure when it comes to ORCID. So this is the plan today, but I'll hand it over first of all to ORCID.
Thank you.
Oh,
come on down. There you go. Thank you, Milena. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for Elsevier for bringing me here. I really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic event, and I've had some wonderful conversations. So just to level set everybody, so everyone has a quick understanding of ORCID and what our role is in the research community. So first and foremost, just a quick, ORCID, we're a nonprofit organization. We launched 2012, that's not that long ago, but gosh, it's been a whirlwind. So in that time, we have grown to international adoption across all subject areas. There was a real genuine problem that needed to be solved. And wow, when we provided a solution, the uptake has been incredible. And so just quickly that we are community driven. So we have our membership community. So researchers get an ORCID ID for free. Member organizations like universities, publishers, funders, they get membership. And that helps sustain us. And really, we keep our staff really small because what most of that funding goes towards paying for data and hosting that data. Because wow, it's expensive to host data. And we're getting a lot of it. So just quickly, ORCID provides 3 services. So first and foremost is that unique ID number for researchers. Because sometimes researchers will have the same name as each other. Sometimes researchers change their name. Basing your research off of your name is not a great idea. There's lots of things that can go wrong. So let's give you a unique ID number that's free of charge, and that's fantastic. Second, we provide a record, and it's the same record for everyone around the world across all subject areas. And researchers have full control over their record at all times. And that's a really big difference from some of the others, maybe like say Google Scholar. You have very little to no control over your Google Scholar record, whereas our ORCID is the opposite. You are the authoritative source of your ORCID record. You control it at all times. And then last, as we were talking about with APIs for systems, because researchers have better things to do than data entry, we have a member API and then a public free API to allow that data to be synchronized between systems so researchers get freed up so they can do other things than enter data. So here's my ORCID ID and my record. So you can see my ORCID ID ends in 5034, and there's my record, and you'll see some check marks on my record. I'll get to that in a little bit. And then Milena doesn't have an ORCID ID yet. And so for everyone, if you don't have an ORCID ID like Milena, Lori Schultz on our board allowed Milena to borrow her record. But it is free. I have timed it. It takes less than 60 seconds. I promise. I've timed even the slowest 2-fingered typer, and it takes less than 60 seconds. So and once you get an ORCID ID and a record, it makes a lot more sense, how it integrates with all the different systems. So please register for one. So just quickly to give you a sense of our adoption around the world, we can see we've got researchers that have used ORCID or cited work in every country around the world, even Antarctica and small remote islands in the North Atlantic. It's everywhere, so it's fantastic. And we have member organizations in 63 countries, and we have consortia, sort of like organizational that do the administration and technical support. So the US is actually the biggest, so there's actually 2 US ORCID consortia, but most countries like Canada, Australia, they'll all have one consortia. And we do have one regional consortia for Latin America, where our Latin Americans here, and the Caribbean, and then we're just about to launch one in the Arab community as well, so that's really exciting. And I think something else to take note of, is that middle block on the bottom, is the number of system integrations. So we have over 6,000 systems that are connected to ORCID. So that's pulling data from ORCID records and writing data ORCID records. And we did over 2 billion API calls last year. Like, it is hot. We are giving and receiving a lot of data, so it's fantastic. So what we did is, to make sure that we had this data flowing in and out, making sure that the integrity and quality of the data was optimized, we came up with this Certified Service Provider program. And so it's free of charge to vendors like Elsevier. And we say to them, if you meet these standards and you're writing data to these standards, we'll make sure that you are certified. And then we'll give you a nice logo. And you can put that on any of your resources that you share in your communications to your member community. So there's the logo there. I should have moved it forward. So that's when we approached Elsevier, they were great. And they said, actually, you know what, that would really work for Pure. And we thought that was fantastic. So we worked with them. And there's the whole process, but just to say that we do an annual review of their integration. We check the quality of data. And then if it looks good at the annual review, we continue that certification. And so this is part of ORCID, as we're like that central infrastructure, just to help ensure that the community is receiving good quality data. Okay. So many systems are using, so many member organizations have Pure, like all of you, and ORCID membership. And so when you have that, you're able to both read and write data to and from ORCID records. And Pure makes that so simple. And you know, Milena was taking me through the page today, and wow, you can do a lot with very little effort. And it's fantastic. And Andy is here from Minnesota, and the amount of data that Andy has put into ORCID records, and he looks at me like I'm crazy because it was so easy for him. But it has a tremendous impact. And so when you write data to your ORCID record, and your researchers, when you write data to your researchers' ORCID records, that data gets recycled into other forms like funding applications and manuscript submissions. And one of the tricks, when I work with funders, they're often so surprised at the employment data is often incorrect. That researchers will usually say that their employer is their closest level, so the lab or their department, whereas they really need to cite the proper university. With, you know, and if you've heard of the ROAR ID, it's our sister organization that provides unique IDs for organizations. If you can have that data in their ORCID, in their record, in their submission, it's fantastic. Not only will the funding agency get the correct organization they should give money to, but then the publishers will know which university should get credit for that publication, which then goes on to impact your rankings, which is a really big deal. So if you can just put that data in their ORCID records first, then everything else in the whole system goes so much smoother. Okay, so here's an example. So many of you are familiar with the Science CV tool on the left, on the far right there. And so when you're submitting when your researchers are submitting applications to the NSF, the NIH, and they're all kind of moving towards this Science CV tool, they have to come up with it's called a biosketch, but it's really a resume. It's a CV, it's a standardized CV. So what we've done is we've been working with the Science CV team. And so if your organization behind me uses Pure, like many of you do, and you write the data from Pure into your researcher's ORCID record, then that data from your ORCID record gets recycled into the biosketch from the Science CV tool, which is fantastic. So you're really helping to optimize the best quality data that makes it into their application for funding, which, you know, your university, especially these days, really wants all that research funding. So the more you do at the start and writing to their ORCID record helps your university in the long run. So we are currently live in the biosketch. And in the future, hopefully not too far in the future, there's another form that your researchers have to do called the Current and Pending Other Support form. That's a mouthful. That's a big title for a form, but they worked on it. That's the shortest they could get to. And hopefully soon, ORCID will populate that. So your researchers will need to do the Current and Pending Other Support once they've received the funding, they have to do regular intervals updating for other funding they've received if they have a new job, other works. So that data can flow from ORCID as well. So just quickly, specifically, in your Pure instance, you've got a lot of data that you can put into your system and that can write to ORCID. So just to be very clear about the data that will go from your Pure system to ORCID to the biosketch. So first and foremost is education. So if you have graduate students and PhD students, it's wonderful if you could write the education credentials to their ORCID record as well. I'm not sure if Pure does that, but that would be something that'd be really helpful. Second, affiliations, specifically their employment, like I mentioned. Make sure you get that nice, good quality data in there. And if you can get it down to the department level, that would be wonderful. The more data, the better. And then last is just the research outputs, their publications, and whatever their research expressions are in their subject area. That will flow into the product section of their biosketch. So just to give you a sense of how the data maps across the different systems. The stronger the data is at the start, the stronger it ends up at the end. So here's an example from Minnesota. Andy, thank you so much for this. So Kendall King, she's got her ORCID ID here. And she's got a very long, very full profile that's hosted in Pure. And then when you look at her ORCID record, you can see that the data that Andy wrote has that green check mark. So it shows that this data has integrity. It's a trusted source, which makes a big difference. When I talk to the funders, they do get applications from people that they have to check, but who claim to be from Minnesota, who claim to be from Stanford or Harvard. But when they can look at their ORCID record and those universities give them that green check mark and say, yes, we verify this person really is, that helps those publishers and funders move your application forward. So it's great when they can do that. And then you can see some of the other data from Pure, the websites and the other IDs. So her Scopus ID is here as well. And then just more specifically in the work section, I just grabbed that. And so you can see, again, this work came from the sources, experts at Minnesota, and that green check mark as well. Now, researchers can add data themselves to their ORCID records, but you'll see that instead of a little green check mark, it's just a silhouette of a human. So you can say, okay, the person put this themselves, take it with a grain of salt, right? But when you get the green check mark, that organization is standing behind that data. All right. Melina, should I pass it over to you now?
Let me.
Go on up.
Yeah, so I just want to touch a little bit on why did we decide on going in this direction? Why was it important for us as a CRIS system to be a certified service provider? We see Pure as like a golden record. Everything is in Pure. We want stuff in Pure, we want a story, we want to expose it, we want to report on it and so on. But we know that we are not the only one in the ecosystem. We know that this data that researchers have put time into putting into Pure needs to go out to the rest of the ecosystem so it can be utilized in many places. And ORCID is one of them. We wanted to make sure that when we pass data along to other sources, ORCID, if we exposed it in an OAI PMH and was picked up by other places, we wanted to make sure that we didn't do anything to pollute the ecosystem by sending out wrong information. Therefore, we wanted to use ORCID in the very best way in Pure. We want to be best in class and be the good kids in the class. So therefore, we came up with this. We made sure that using ORCID, when we import something, we only import to stuff where we actually know that this is the correct ORCID ID. We wanted to make sure when we expose data and send out researcher information that we actually send out correct IDs so it doesn't go wrong further out in the ecosystem. So that was why we went into this certification program. And this is what we were asked to do in order to be certified. When we looked at this, we were actually very close to being able to do so. We have integrated with ORCID, can't remember, since 16 or something, 15, 16. We have integrated with ORCID for a long, long time, and we have done a lot to improve the way we did it. So in order for us to fulfill all of these requirements, there was actually not that much needed on our side. So what did we do? So first of all, we talked to ORCID and demoed what we already were able to do in Pure. We had a little bit of talk about how we could optimize it, what we needed to do. We implemented all of these changes. It happened sort of gradually over the last year, 2024. You saw bits and pieces of things coming in that had to do with ORCID, but not much. Mostly it was because we needed a little bit of help text to make it clearer for the researcher inside Pure what was happening. So that was actually most of our thing. But then we had to do a little bit behind the scene on how we utilized the ORCIDs in Pure. So that was it. Then we demoed it to ORCID. They were happy, and we moved on. A few talks here and there, but most of all, they were happy, so we got the certification, and we're happy for that. We like being the good kids in the class. In Pure, you can integrate with ORCID in two ways. You can use the public API, and if you do so, you're able to manually import, and you can go into Pure and you can authorize your ORCID. The researcher can log in and authorize the ORCID. If you want to send data to ORCID, you need to have a membership. You need to access the member API. On the configuration page on the admin, you can set up all of these credentials in order to get the connection rolling. I'm moving a little bit quickly here. In Pure, you as a researcher can log in and you can say, I would like to authorize that this ORCID is actually mine. It has to be done by the researcher himself. You cannot use this little switch user functionality, because what happens in here is you click on this and you're sent to ORCID, and you need to log into ORCID with your own ORCID credentials, and then we take the connection up. Once you have authorized that, and depending on what you choose as an institution, we can start sending data to ORCID, sort of synchronize it into ORCID. But first of all, you need to choose to do that as an institution, and then the researcher himself or herself need to log in and authorize it that they want to send the data to ORCID. So that's the process inside Pure. What we had to do after that is we had to look at all our integrations and see, are we using ORCID in the proper way in Pure? So what we have chosen to do now, based on this certification, is that when we import and match based on ID numbers, we only match to ORCIDs that has been authorized by the researcher. So that means that if the ORCID IDs just are in Pure without the researcher saying, yes, this is mine, then we don't use it for mapping, because we don't know if it's correct. The other thing happens when we send data out of Pure by OAI, PMH, and so on, we will only use authorized ORCIDs. Whether we're doing that in all places, I am still a little bit unsure, but that's on our agenda to go through all our export formats and making sure that it's only authorized. But that's at least our intention, and this is what we want to do. Yeah. Also, a small thing that we need to change, I'm sorry, I skipped, it's our Pure portal. We want to change our Pure portal, so you have a little ORCID ID on your portal. If you have an ORCID in Pure, it will be gray if it's not authorized, and green if it is authorized. So some of the things that we will be doing with our new Pure portal, so people know whether they can trust the ORCID ID. So this is what we are doing. We, in the spring of this year, updated our integration with ORCID. ORCID got a good handful of new publication types, mostly publication types that was interesting for arts and humanities, research within arts and humanities. We updated our integration so you can now import this correctly into Pure if you're importing from ORCID, but also we updated what we call our mapping file to ORCID, so we now, when we expose it, also map to these types. ORCID at the same time deprecated a few publication types. We changed our logic for mapping that, so we now don't map to something that has been deprecated. If any of you are exporting data from Pure to ORCID and have changed that mapping file, you might want to revisit your mapping file, but only if you haven't changed it, we would have updated it for you. So that's what happened. We have also now, we built a data site integration, going to talk about that tomorrow if you're interested. And there we are using ORCID also, and also from within Pure you can mint DOIs. We forgot to send ORCID IDs when we minted DOIs. We have changed that now, so now we also are best in class in there, and we'll be sending both ORCID and raw IDs to ORCID when we mint stuff. Yeah, so we have a few things on our roadmap for coming up. First of all, the logo on the Pure Portal we need to change. We know that we need to do something with former employees. We are not satisfied with the way that we handle former employees, but we haven't found a good solution yet. So we will be talking a little bit with ORCID about what do they recommend. We have some solution in place. It's a little bit tricky because we need to send something and stop sending something. It's a little bit tricky, but we will be looking at that this autumn. And then the OAI PMH we need to update. So that's what we have currently in our roadmap on ORCID. More to come later.